I'm Mr. Saturn. Welcome to the second episode in Leading Life, Leadership in Every Area of Life, a podcast that just likes to talk about leading and following and so many just topics that are on our minds all the time as we try to navigate the world and try to figure all of this stuff out. Let's do it together. I got my cup of coffee and I like it black. And I have some incense burning in the room. And it is a perfect atmosphere to talk about leading multiple relationships. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because for the last 4 to 5 years, have been leading multiple romantic relationships successfully, long term, committed relationships. And so I wanted to talk about topics such as polyamory, ethical non monogamy, and let's first kind of limit the scope here. What I'm not talking about, and what I'm really not talking to, is a culture of hookups. While there's no judgment from me, and that may be something you enjoy, that's really outside of the scope. I'm talking about relationships, not casual friendships, not casual hookups. I'm not really talking about the lifestyle where you just get together for sexual encounters. I'm not really talking about building a body count, so to say. I'm talking about leading relationships, leading something more than just something sexual. That's why I use the term romantic. And while romance is a wide spectrum, it can include a lot of different things, and it can include sex and sexual activities, but it doesn't necessarily have to. You can have romance with or without that if you want to. So, ethical non monogamy is being in romantic relationships with more than one other person, and it can be two people, three people, it could be uh, a group of people. It can mean a lot of different things. It can certainly mean polyamory, but it doesn't necessarily have to go by that label. An excellent resource that helped me navigate this whole world when a little background about myself. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was in a long term, committed marital relationship, and we opened up that relationship, and we still wanted to stay together. We felt a pull towards having uh, additional relationships because we didn't feel it was right to expect each other to be everything for each other. And so we entered into polyamory and began looking at polyamory. And polyamory, as defined by this resource that I like called More Than Two, it was a book that really helped me figure out and navigate all of it. But polyamory to them is this definition: it's the non possessive, honest, responsible, and ethical philosophy and practice of loving multiple people simultaneously. Polyamory emphasizes consciously choosing how many partners one wishes to be involved with rather than accepting social norms which dictate loving only one person at a time. Polyamory is from the root words poly, meaning many, and amor, meaning love, hence many loves or polyamory. And so I like that term. Some people like to use the term ethical non monogamy because love has a lot of different meanings and a lot of different definitions. Some of the possible ways that people love each other is a closed marriage, is monogamy. is a relationship, a committed, closed relationship, which is an agreement among the members of that relationship not to get sexually and or romantically or oftentimes emotionally involved with anyone outside the relationship. Uh, a closed marriage, which would be in a lot of cultures, a traditional marriage would be where there is no emotional intimacy or sexuality outside of that marriage. Let's talk about commitment for a moment. So, commitment means a pledge or a promise to do something, a dedication to a long term course of action, uh, an engagement, an involvement, to put in charge or trust, to entrust, to carry into action, to um, be, to commit to, of course, committed, commitment. And so some people have uh, a closed relationship, monogamous, a one person for life or a one person at a time uh, relationship style. Those are hard enough to lead. Speaking from experience and speaking to anyone in a marriage, in a closed one person monogamous relationship or marriage, those relationships are tough to lead. It becomes even increasingly difficult in a diverse amount of ways to lead multiple relationships, to lead multiple romantic relationships, and to lead relationships where there are emotional emotions, and there are commitments, and there are the everyday practical things of considerations like finances and children, and just there are so many different things, where you work, where you live, all of those different considerations. There is life. Being in a relationship with someone is doing life with that person. It's not just being in a bedroom with a person, it's doing life with them and doing everyday life with them. And when you have multiple people that you're doing everyday life with, to one degree or another, to say different percentages of who you are, of your existence, and and still finding time to exist in and of yourself, because we are people. Before we are relationships, we are individuals. We have a relationship with ourself as well as others, so we have to make time for ourself. I want to emphasize that when you're leading any relationship, self-care is important, and we want to emphasize that quite early in the conversation, that self-care is important. It's important to have a healthy relationship with yourself. And before you think about having relationships in whether monogamous or ethical non-monogamy, we use the term ethical there, by the way, because there's no cheating. There's no, um, we're, everyone is aware of each other. They may not be in contact with each other, but everyone knows that everyone else exists in the world, or in our little world. And oftentimes, uh, polyamory, multiple ethical non-monogamy means that in one way or another, we're all family, a chosen family. And that means we're a group of individuals uh, that have a common relation to one another. And while I may be related to one partner and be related to another partner, and they may not be directly related together, they may be related through me, they still share. We still share a a level of family, and that comes in. And what comes into family is feelings. Let's talk about a word called compersion. Compersion is the feeling of taking joy in the joy that others you love share among themselves, especially taking joy in the knowledge that of the people that you love are expressing their love for one another. Uh, it's a term that was coined in San Francisco in a commune that practiced polyfidelity in the early 1990s. It's since disbanded, but it was a term that they coined for that feeling of joy, knowing that that someone else is sharing in the love of your partner. It's kind of not necessarily the opposite, but it is a different feeling to uh, a different feeling to jealousy. Uh, Non monogamy is a relationship that allows for more than one person at a time. And so when you have multiple people in your life, multiple partners in your that are practicing in your life, you feel a lot of different things. And um, when you have different partners, you find yourself oftentimes in different situations. What are some of the types of configurations? Let's move into that for a moment. There are polysingles. These are people that are not currently involved in any relationship, but they believe in the concept of ethical non monogamy and perhaps hope to incorporate it in future relationships that they may have. And it's good to step back and do some research and dip your toes very cautiously into that pool, not to jump into a bunch of hookups to try to simulate ethical non-monogamy, but to make sure that when you form your first relationship, that ethical non-monogamy is at the forefront of that relationship, being that it is a possibility that everyone is aware that that is something that you're interested in, and then dipping your toes very slowly into any additional relationships, slowly taking your time. Poly couples are committed couples that are open to having relationships outside of their own relationship. It's people who have formed that first relationship and uh, they may choose to become involved with another couple, another single partner, or date individually. They may be an open poly group or marriage. These are a group of three more people that are committed to one another in some way, and they're open to adding new partners to the relationship or open to dating individually. There's closed poly groups in relationships. These are three or more people who are committed to one another in some way. Therefore, they're not really they're practicing non-monogamy, but they've chosen not to add any new partners. This is commonly referred to as polyfidelity. This is somewhat my relationship. My relationship is I am a hinge and I have two partners, and my one partner is in a relationship with me, and my other partner's in a relationship with me, but I'm not looking to add any additional partners. Hence, I am off the market. I'm not available, but I am not practicing monogamy. I'm practicing polyamory, and I'm in these two closed relationships. Taking a sip of my coffee there. Uh, there are an intentional family or an expanded family. And this is a relationship in which three or more partners consciously choose each other as family. And the partners may or may not live together, and they may or may not be sexually or intimately involved mutually. Um, and it is not necessarily a requirement. Sex or emotional or romantic requirements may not be a requirement for family membership. We often see this in like a leather family, for instance. That is a group of people that live in what they call a leather household. You may see those people that wear lots of leather, and they practice a lifestyle like that. It is oftentimes somewhat kinky, but it is an example of a chosen family or an intentional family. Uh, there is a um, there is a household that they have together. And we can often find some examples of this outside of kinky relationships, but I was just using that as one example that I am aware of. There is an intimate network. These are individuals who desire friendship and perhaps sex with their lovers and other friends, forming a web of varying connections within a social circle. It's like a little bit larger than a family. It's just a group. They're often these networks are developed around open marriages, open couples, and sometimes their relationship depth is. They use terms such as primary, secondary, and such to describe the varying levels of commitment involved. And, that is something a little bit larger and a little bit more diverse. And I would say a little bit more rare. It's definitely a jewel or a treasure for those who have found it, but um, it isn't easy to form, and it forms somewhat organically, and it takes a lot of patience for those involved. So let's look at a few of the myths, a few ethical non monogamy myths. When we look at myths and we uh, put fantasy aside and we look more at reality, it helps us figure out how to lead ourselves within the context of multiple relationships. People who are involved in uh, one of the common myths, people that are involved in ethical non monogamy are somehow have more evolved than monogamous counterparts, or somehow they're more advanced or more enlightened. Well, people are all different, and that's it. There are monogamous people who are enlightened, passionate, caring, compassionate, wise, and benevolent people. And there are people who practice ethical non monogamy who are selfish and inconsiderate, and they're just downright jerks. People are people, and you can be wise or you can be a jerk, regardless of your relationship model. Being polyamorous or being ethically non monogamous does not automatically mean that you're in possession of some secret wisdom or special enlightenment. Another common myth is love is limitless. Well, love, at least romantic love, isn't limitless. It's always necessary to be bounded by time, energy, and resources. There are billions of people on this planet, and it's simply impossible for both emotional and practical reasons to form meaningful relationships with all of them. Um, it's we are limited creatures. We're bound by several limitations, and I think it's smart for us to investigate and know what our limits are. I know that for me, my limits currently are these two relationships. I don't feel like, I feel like it would be pressing me beyond my limits to be involved in anything more. So while love may be limitless in the abstract, in the concrete world of work, conflicting schedules, and finite resources, it love is really limited. Put simply, there's a finite boundary on the number of people that one can love, one can invest in, one can spend time with. And there's a boundary on the emotional resources that are available to anybody. So I have limited number of resources. And so I have to, have a relationship with myself as well. And I can't be pulled in 15 different directions. I have relationships, um, not like romantic relationships, but I have relationships with children, like in a parenting context, relationships with my employer and my and the employees of the company that I work with, and I have relationships I have a relationship with myself. I have friends, just, friend relationships. And so there is only so much of me emotionally and physically to go around. And so there's only so much that I can practically invest in the area of romance and in those types of relationships. And well, it's quite probably true of many people. It's not true that everyone can be polyamorous or non monogamous. Not everyone is able to choose it. There's social conditioning, but putting that aside, there are many people who seem to be naturally predisposed to monogamy, and a few who seem permanently wired for it. Just as there are many people who seem to be wired for non monogamous relationships. Being poly, so to speak, or being monogamous are not really binary. It is somewhat of a spectrum, just like most things. People can, under the right circumstances and with the right people, learn to be happy in any relationship style. So some people believe that we're monogamous, uh, and it's just an accident of social conditioning and nothing more. And if everyone could, everyone would be non-monogamous, and that the reality is just way more complex than that. Is that there are people who just don't have the capacity to invest in more relationships than just one. There's a huge myth that poly people don't feel jealousy. Well, anyone can feel jealous under the right circumstances. Being non monogamous doesn't make you immune to jealousy at all. We're all prone to it just as much as those in more traditional relationships. Jealousy is merely a feeling. Of and by itself, it's not good or bad. Jealousy is almost always a symptom of an underlying insecurity. The most effective way to handle jealousy is often to solve that underlying problem that creates it. Anyone, regardless of your relationship style, can experience doubt, insecurity, and therefore jealousy. People in successful relationships often don't feel jealous in the same situations that might make people who are accustomed to traditional relationship models feel jealous. So if you're in a non-monogamous relationship, you may not feel jealous in the same ways. Probably because you have different doubts, different insecurities, different uh, different jealousies. Many polyamorous or poly or ethically non-monogamous people will claim that they don't experience jealousy, and this may be true in one sense, but it's not related to being it's not related to their relationship style. Rather, it's more related to being secure in yourself and secure in your relationships. So, no matter how you lead, whether you lead one relationship or you lead multiple relationships, you need to be secure or become secure in yourself, hence the need for a real strong relationship with yourself. And you need to be secure in your relationships. You need to develop a sense of security, a sense of stability. You don't need to be all over the place. Consistency is really the key to it all. People in any relationship style can be secure, and people in any relationship style can be insecure. Everyone has their own circumstances that may trigger insecurity. A good goal in any relationship is to strive to create a set of mechanisms for dealing with insecurity and dealing with jealousy. One technique for doing this is to recognize the roots of the feeling. Another is to confront the feeling head on rather than attempting to dismiss it as irrational or unjustified. Feelings are irrational by their very nature. They don't always make sense, and jealousy is no exception. Dealing with it directly and openly and acknowledging it for what it is often an excellent first step to isolating and addressing the problem that is underlying it. Now, people in um, multiple relationships are not necessarily more honest. Honesty is often considered the cornerstone of any successful relationship. The consequences for being dishonest or dishonest behavior in any relationship can be devastating, leading up to maybe even including the demise of the relationship. So we need to make a conscious effort as a leader in, or as a, when we are leading ourselves in any relationships, to be open and honest in those relationships. The same values that make for successful multiple relationships: honesty, integrity, compassion, respect, trust, love, understanding, good communication, conflict resolution skills, they make for successful monogamous relationships too. So, those same skills are good for all relationships that we enter into. We don't automatically possess these skills. They need to be developed. And people sometimes lack in those areas. So we definitely need to be sure that we are looking at what we believe about honesty, integrity, compassion, respect, trust, understanding. And we need to put tangible actions, make tangible small goals that have actionable steps for developing honesty, integrity, compassion, trust, and respect and understanding. We need to definitely take a look at our communication and conflict resolution style that we currently have. How do we handle communication? How do we handle conflict? And before we enter into relationships with other people, we need to understand how we communicate, how we deal with conflict, and try to develop those areas to where we're better communicators and better at handling conflict, just better at handling conflict. uh, People who practice non monogamy have been doing it for years. You can pick up most holy books and find people in multiple relationships. You can find them in the Bible, for instance, which is a holy book. You can find it in other holy books as well. You can find the idea of people practicing non monogamous relationships. You can also find people in most spiritual and most traditions and cultures practicing monogamous relationships as well. You'll find both. None of them are new ideas. And people aren't necessarily more spiritual one than another. And, all of them have their own, uh, their own benefits and their own consequences. They have uh, their own things, their own obstacles. That's what I'm looking for. They have their own obstacles to overcome. But I'm confident that you can do it. And as you continue to listen to the different podcasts and we talk about leading ourselves and leading others in a variety of different ways, I think that you'll continue to grow as a leader. And no matter what relationship styles you find yourself in. I'm Mr. Saturn. Thank you for joining me for this Leading Life podcast. It was a joy speaking with you today. You can find us on social media. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Amazon Music. You can find us on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. We're all around. You can find this. We've now branched out and we're being distributed on iHeartRadio, for instance. And you can find us everywhere that podcasts are heard. And you can connect with us. You can go to Facebook and you can search Leading Life, and you can find and connect with us on Facebook for now. And we'll be adding more social networks in the future. It was a joy speaking with you today, and I'll talk with you again soon.